What's the quickest you've ever quit a job because they've either lied to you about it or it's not what you signed up for? What was it? 4 hours. I was looking for my first part-time job. I walked into a restaurant asking for a job as a waiter. They said to come back tomorrow for a training shift. There was no paperwork, never even asked for my ID. I didn't know how it was supposed to work. I worked for 3 hours taking orders and bringing out food after they went over some training. I then went to ask how I'm going to be paid. They said there was no pay for the first 3 months since it's the training period. I went home and never came back. I've never heard of this. Gotta be illegal. Story 2. Walked off with a whole crew over safety one time on day 1. The company wanted to dig out a utility trench in an old neighborhood in between houses and streets. In places, it had to be better than 20 feet deep, and there was nowhere that had more than maybe 30 or 40 feet of access, meaning I couldn't slope or bench it adequately. Mind, this is California riverbed dirt, which is sand full of rock and caves in as fast as you can dig it out. Asked about shoring in trench boxes, and the boss said, "It's fine, it won't be that long." We spent about 5 minutes calmly explaining how far up his butt his head was lodged, then walked off. Story 3. Got hired to do IT. Told it was breaking down and setting up IT systems for various companies. Fantastic. I know how to do that. The pay is good. I get to pick which contracts I take or don't. My first job was a 2-day one for a uni library that was like 2.5 hours away by train. I had to be there early, but they were putting me up in a hotel for a night, and I got a travel bonus. Get there for 2 days, I was literally organizing books on those rolling shelves libraries have by the Dewey Decimal System. It turned out it was the end of the move and we were just tidying up. Whatever, I got like $800 for that and it was pretty chill. The next one I take is another uni. Actually, my first uni, setting up their new chemical engineering building. Get there and we're literally just moving lab equipment from the old building to the new. Not even setting it up. Pretty crap, and I'm starting to ask questions. But I got paid for the full day even though we had finished by lunch. Third and final was working at the Reserve Bank of Australia. A very secure building, have to be signed in, federal police there. I have to check my bag, can't take it up. Our boss that day was like an hour late, so I'm already miffed. We all go upstairs and we get our first security briefing from a cop explaining no phones. We're not allowed to go anywhere without a police escort. Makes sense. Then our boss steps up and explains what we're doing. Basically, one team was moving their office up 2 floors and needed all of these crates of documents to come with them. We were to load them onto those flat movers trolleys with no handles, get in the lift with our cop, and upload upstairs. Repeat as necessary for 3 days. So we're about to start, and I pull him aside, explain in no uncertain terms I was quitting on the spot. I was misled about the job and am severely overqualified for this. I have multiple high-level IT certifications, and that's what I signed up for. He tries to get me to stay, explains he's got those too. He just had to do the grunt work for a bit before getting to do the actual IT stuff. I just come back with, even if I believed you, I don't want to work for a company that will so brazenly lie to and mislead people so they can scrounge up employees. I'm quitting. Here's where it got awkward because we only had 1 cop, so boss man has to go off and find a second cop to escort me out. I'm standing there awkwardly for 10 minutes. He comes back and I get taken back downstairs, sign out, grab my bag and go. The company was so incompetent, they still paid me for the full 3 days. Story 4. In the mid-2000s, my wife applied for an office admin role. She was told to meet in a public location in the city center for an interview. A bit strange, but she went. She met the woman, she was led to the entrance of a W.H. Smith, where there was a pop-up stall selling makeup and told, "This is your stand. It's 100% commission-based, and you ought to nip to that McDonald's over there for a wee, as I'll be back to close the stand in 8 hours. She walked straight past the McDonald's and came home. Story 5. Under 5 minutes. Applied for a supervisory position at a new company in the same field I'd been working in for 5 years. Go through the whole process interview. Came in for the job offer. Signed it. The person who was going to be my boss and her boss were both in the middle of telling me how excited they were to have me. Guy comes walking in, regional manager or something like that. Basically, both the people I was talking to reported to him, but like several levels higher, announces that he's decided that all supervisors should be internal promotions, so he doesn't want me to start as a supervisor, but I can start in what was basically the same job I had, but at an offer of just over half of what I was making. He didn't know what I was currently making for all I know. And then in 3 to 6 months, he'd consider promoting me to supervisor once I showed I could do the job. So I told the guy basically, no thanks, changed my mind. picked up the job offer, tore it in half, and walked out to the other two employees yelling at this guy. I did get the impression that those two didn't know what that guy was going to do. Story 6. I was lied to at an interview, 2006. I was 20, desperate, and broke. The job was advertised as a customer service representative, office-based. I was relieved to have finally gotten a stable job with a half-decent salary. On the first day, I was driven 60 miles from where I lived to a large village for the purpose of observing face-to-face customer relations. Two representatives drove me and two other new starters there. Not much conversation during the journey. When we arrived, I was told to don a tabard with a well-respected charity emblazoned on it. Turns out it was a door-to-door canvassing. The two reps were salesmen. They told us they were specifically targeting the elderly. They repeatedly lied, bullied, and guilt-tripped pensioners into signing up. They told barefaced lies that us new starters were from the charity as supervisors. They lied about working directly for the charity when in fact they were on commission for a separate sales company. I felt sick to my stomach for the vulnerable people they just conned out of a fair bit of money. There was no office-based job, it was just canvassing. The two reps ended up bragging about how much money they made. After an hour, I told them this wasn't for me. They replied they weren't leaving the village for another 7 hours. I only had 2.6 pounds in my pocket, bank account was in its overdraft, not much credit on my phone. I walked for hours in the direction of a bus route to my city, managed to find a driver on a bus who agreed to take me all the way with the little money I had. Story 7. I'm not going to lie, I gave it the benefit of the doubt. I worked for Elliott Management Group, which does B2B sales for credit card processors. I had to cold call over 100 people or businesses a day, and then go door to door trying to schedule appointments for a demo with my boss since I was in training. The training was actually with a guy who was incredibly awesome. I probably did 8 days of this, and then one day I just left to do scheduled B2B work, went home, and never once looked back. I forgot about $110 in training pay. I was so damn broke then, and that $110 was worth it at the time. But F that place though, it was awful. Story 8. Olive Garden after a 4-hour training shift. The place was filthy and there were no food handling techniques in place. The kitchen was filthy, falling apart, and the cooks were filthy too. Poor hygiene, dirty clothes. I made the decision not to come back after I saw a cook eating on the line with food splashing out of his mouth. I got a job at a restaurant down the road, and a few months later, one of the managers from Olive Garden was hired. I told him it was disgusting, and he agreed, and it was the reason he left too. Story 9. A month. I was working at a paid internship for a personal injury law firm when I was in law school. I was doing boring crap like deposition summaries, medical record summaries, and the like. I was in my 3rd year and really wanted to get my hands dirty. I offered to one of the partners to write motions. We don't do that here. Okay, how about I call clients who haven't been contacted in over a year and just touch base, let them know we're working for them. We don't call clients. Screw those people. Those people are the reason he drove a Bentley and lived in a 10,000 square foot house and his kids were all in prestigious private schools. I quit on the spot and discovered something about my own principles. Story 10. I worked 5 days at a hospital, training to be front desk. The second day I worked, the manager said I was too smart to just be a front desk girl. He had been thinking about adding a new position that would ensure the quality and temp of the breakfast bar, among a few other things because currently nothing was being done. The hot lamps weren't keeping the food hot enough, the butter laid in room temp water, which was supposed to stay in ice cubes. I mostly worked in food service up to that point, so I was horrified, but it also felt weird he was wanting this for me after day 2. But my god, the butter guys. So I went back. Day 3 comes to a fairly uneventful close, nothing too bad. Day 4, he takes me and another new hire out to lunch because we were out visiting local businesses and sites for brochures for the hotel. At lunch, he insists on buying me a beer. I was 19 and also felt it was unprofessional, so I said no thanks. He orders a Yuengling draft, and when it comes to the table, he says, "We aren't leaving until you drink this." Like, scowling. Then he smiles and says, "I'm just playing, it's for me." I told my husband about everything and he said maybe it's a cultural difference. Maybe you can work the opposite shift as him. Was I misunderstanding things? So I go back, day 5, the last day. I go into work and he asks me if I would like to get a pedicure. I said no because I was really confused at first and thought he misspoke. He said he would pay for it if he could watch me get my toes done. So I decided there I was done. But I wanted to at least finish out the day. Poor college student and newlywed. I'm about to leave and I'm checking everything I need to be able to do so. I had to go into the laundry room. I don't even remember why. I walked in and the door closed and my back was to the door and I heard it open again. I turned around and it's the manager and he grabbed me in a bear hug and said, "See how nice this is?" It wasn't, fam. I squirmed and he finally let go and started speaking, but I ran out of the room, ran behind the front desk and got my purse and left. I reported it to the corporate office contact, but that ended up being the owner of the hotel, who was friends with the manager, so a whole lot of nothing happened. But anyway, that's the tale of my shortest job. Story 11. I applied for a job in a care home because I had been working the night shift at a hotel alone. I was dealing with and looking after 100 people all by myself, and I did it for a year and 9 months. It was hell. I faced constant mistreatment from middle-aged married men and people who couldn't get a room. So I applied to a care home. I had done care work for 10 years, but quit because the constant strain was damaging my back. After working various jobs, I applied to a small 47-room care home. Both the management and the job description said mild dementia. Most are independent but need a small amount of help, and they get moved on when their dementia gets severe. I thought, perfect, I'll apply. First, I did 2 day shifts. I thought, not bad, I guess. So I moved on to nights. I was always planning on nights, but they said I'd need to do a day shift or 2 to meet the residents, as most would be asleep by the time I arrived for the 12-hour shift. Yeah, right. 2 hours in and everyone was still awake. I had to put everyone to bed and they all suddenly lost the ability to walk, despite management saying they were mobile. I was in pieces by my second shift. I'm getting anxiety just sitting outside now before my shift, just like I did at the hotel. It's absolutely nothing like they said it would be. It's major dementia and some can barely walk. I have to physically walk behind some of them. Monday night, I was helping a woman to the toilet. Keep in mind, I'm still on my shadowing shift. The team leader brings me in and says, "Right, you need to support her." So I did. Then she screamed in my face. Not like that, like this. Basically wedging the elderly lady up by her clothes. I refused to do that, and she screamed in my face again and told me to screw off, I'll do it myself. So yeah, hence the post. I'm almost 2 weeks in and I want to quit. I have a phone screening on Monday for a new job, but I'm worried my taxes will be messed up due to changing jobs so soon. Story 12. I did sales in a niche market and was really good at it. I had a client who worked in a similar field and kept trying to get me to come work for him part-time. I eventually told him I would give it a try. There was an expo coming up where he had a booth and he asked if I wanted to work it with him. I ended up selling 3 units at a festival on the first day, which was about $20,000 in sales. I should have earned a big commission on those. Because I wasn't familiar with the specific products, I had asked the boss a few questions regarding the specs. At the end of the day, when I asked about the commissions, he told me I didn't earn any. He claimed they were his sales because he had answered those questions. I told him to go screw himself and never to come into my store again. Then I sought out the people I had made the sales to so I could let them know not to trust the guy. Story 13. 13 days. After the COVID vaccine had become widely available, I was hired into a middle management for a large role, well-known entity that had developed some solutions for COVID testing as part of its business. The position was in office. My boss was remote in another state. My first week at the company was spent on some mandatory HR stuff and sitting in remote meetings with various team members and consultants. My second week was spent out of state at a big company-wide event. I met my boss for the first time for about 20 minutes on the first day of this event. I saw them again for about 5 minutes at the end of the trip. Monday of the following week, I show up to work and am kind of looking for things to do as I had not received any follow-up from my boss, nor did I have any real direction on training. I spent a lot of time making calls, visiting desks, and sending emails asking for direction while reviewing product information. At 3 p.m., I learned from a colleague that there was apparently a COVID outbreak amongst attendees of the event I had attended, including my boss, who never said anything to me about being sick, and a bunch of other people with whom I'd had much longer interactions. We had COVID tests available on site, but they weren't available to people with suspected infection, so I opted to leave to do an at-home test and work from home to isolate after exposure. I finally got a call at 2 p.m. the following day from my boss who seemed angry that I wasn't in the office. My COVID test was negative, so I came in on Wednesday and was greeted by HR, who was going to write me up. I put my badge on the table at that moment and walked out. I'm now blacklisted from working for the company or its subsidiaries. Story 14. Well, somewhere between 3 and 5 days. I decided after 3 days that I was going to quit, but it took me a couple of days to talk my old employer into letting me return to my previous job. I worked for one division of a larger corporation. I left my division to work at headquarters. It didn't take long, only 3 days, to figure out that what they wanted me to do at headquarters was way out of my comfort zone. Way out. Anyway, I got my old job back and headquarters hired another guy from my department. He worked there for a couple of years until he was fired for mistreating his administrative assistant. We all know he was that kind of guy, and eventually headquarters figured it out too. I went back and enjoyed a long and happy career until I retired from my original job. Story 15. Applied for a job with the city. It was a small pay decrease. Then, when I got to the interview, they said for the first 6 months it'd be $5 an hour, less than what they stated. Okay, that's weird, but not a deal breaker with the other benefits. I signed the letter saying I'd start in 2 weeks. Then they said that it'd be another $3 an hour less until I got my certifications renewed, even though mine were good for another 2 years. At this point, the pay for the job was like $12 an hour less than stated. I told them that's shady and told them to go with someone else. Story 16. It was a fireworks packaging and pelletizing job, which would have been for 8 hours or so, starting at 5 a.m. I accepted this temporary job to pay the bills, of course, but I knew it was going to be rough. In maybe 10 minutes of a meeting when I showed up with a dozen other idiots, plus maybe 2 minutes explanation of how they wanted things done. My job was to close, tape up, lift a 40-pound box at a time to stack on a pallet into a lattice work of boxes up to 8 feet high and then run around the box tower with plastic wrap. Important to note, I showed up to this job at 440 pounds. Being a fat kid and a fat guy, I've been told you need to do more, where my family would criticize me often. I took the job because I needed money, but a small part of me was trying to see if I could even do something like this. The answer was no. Those dozen other people got placed in relatively easy positions on this line of work. They put the most out-of-shape guy in the most physically demanding position. That running around the pallet I mentioned? Yeah, there was a forklift guy watching and waiting for me every second. A job that requires speed, some physical accuracy, nimble on the feet, and cooperation where nobody gave it. So I walked out on the first break, maybe 7 or 8 a.m., walked out of the warehouse, into my car, and went home where I was so sore for the next couple of days that I shuffled around the house enough for my grandmother to tell me I belonged in a nursing home. She was not very kind with her words. It didn't feel great to try to align expectations set through criticism only to be criticized more. Story 17. Does walking out during the interview or while reading the offer letter count? If so, I have walked during both of those. After the job started, my record for leaving is lunchtime on the first day. The reason for that one was that my manager was a schmuck. The company monitored the hell out of the computers. If your mouse or keyboard stopped for even a minute, they were wandering by. This was a dev job, and they only provided one monitor. I was working on some code and needed to look something up, but I didn't want to switch windows. So I looked it up on my phone. The manager came by and started yelling at me. 5 minutes later, it was lunch, and I just went home. Honestly, the job paid the best, but I had 5 other offers on the table. It just wasn't worth it, so I took another offer. If you're enjoying this video, don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos like this. Story 18. Last year, when I was desperate for a job, I was applying to pretty much anything and everything. Ended up getting an interview for a wood shop. It paid about $4 less than what I really needed, but I figured a job was a job. They told me in the interview that the whole entire shop was getting an upgrade, all new machines and everything. And my job would eventually move from doing actual woodwork to just maintaining the machines that were supposed to do most of the work. All this was planned for the summer. Sounded like a good gig and eventual easy money. They liked me in the interview and pretty much made me an offer on the spot. About 3 months in, it was announced that instead of getting a whole new workshop, we were getting a fancy vending machine for the break room. Put in my 2 weeks soon after. Story 19. Not me, but a colleague. He and I were managers at a software company. He was looking for a more exciting opportunity. A bigger company offered him a director position, a team of 50 engineers, and a very visible project. He was ecstatic. We gave him a proper farewell and everything. On Monday over lunch, he called my boss and asked for his old job back. It took him 4 hours to realize that he was being set up as the fall guy. His boss had asked for updates 3 times already. He came back and was all good. Story 20. I have spent the past 5.5 years working in general landscaping, spreading mulch in the spring, leaf cleanups in the fall, that kind of thing. During the summer, I typically shape prune shrubs, but I occasionally have the chance to dabble in small tree pruning jobs and really enjoyed learning about them. So in October of this year, I applied at a company that specializes in tree pruning and removals. I figured I'd spend the whole winter just dragging limbs to the chipper, but it's a chance to watch the actual arborists climb much bigger trees than I'd ever work in and ask some questions over lunch. My hope was that if they like me, maybe they will start teaching me to climb trees next spring. By the end of the second day, I was seeing major yellow flags, and a month later, they were all confirmed red. Pretty much everyone smoked cigarettes in the trucks, and I was getting sick of all the secondhand smoke I was breathing. A lot of the guys don't wear the industry standard PPE while operating chainsaws. That's not a risk to my personal safety, but working in the most dangerous industry for which OSHA keeps statistics on, I don't want to surround myself and learn from people who don't take those dangers seriously. And it turns out that this company's main shrub pruning guy left this past summer, so now his right-hand man is the guy for the shrubs, and I feel like they hired me to be his number two. If I wanted to keep pruning shrubs for another half-decade, I'd have stayed at my previous employer. I came here wanting to learn trees. I thought I made that clear through the hiring process, but the manager misled me, and so when I leave for a company that actually wants to teach me to climb, she's going to realize she wasted both of our time. I sent out an application a few weeks ago. The company seemed interested in my resume, and I think their culture is a much better fit for me, but it's just not a good time to be job hopping in my very seasonal industry. I think I'm going to stick it out here through the winter and then start sending out a bunch of applications to various companies in the spring. Story 21. Less than one day. I had applied at Orkin only because I needed something ASAP, and a friend that worked there got me an interview. I took a computerized test to see what the best fit would be within the company. The manager was very excited because I guessed I scored very high and qualified for any position they had. I took the job. At the time, I had very long hair, and the manager told me I would have to cut it off. And then I asked if a woman with long hair came in and did the same as I did on the test. Would she be forced to cut it? He replied that men had short hair and women had long hair, and he wouldn't hire a woman anyway. I stood up, said thanks but no thanks, and I quit. Story 22. Actually, after the interview, I was approached by a competitor's company for a position due to a former coworker who went there and said I'd be a perfect replacement for one of their long-term employees. As I walked through the position, I was told that the person I was replacing would be training me, and when done, I was to fire him. Noped out big time, as if they did this to a long-term employee, what would they do to me? A couple of months later, when talking to a neighbor at a block party, I put two and two together and realized it was my neighbor I would be replacing, as he told me he had to put in his retirement paperwork. I didn't tell him that I was going to replace him. The real kicker was he passed away within a year due to cancer. He didn't find out until after retiring that he had cancer. Story 23. About a month. It was a brutal package handling job. Even if the lines were shut down for a few minutes and you were in a safe place to sit, it was not allowed. Each station was made for two people but staffed with one. I can't remember if it was the break was 10 or 15 minutes, but it didn't matter because the 15 minutes included walking across the giant warehouse to leave and walking through the metal detectors back to your station, so it was really only 5 minutes. I went home exhausted every day and would only have the energy to shower and collapse in bed. My body hurt too much to get myself dinner. One day, my partner was in the hospital and I planned to limp over there after my shift ended. After being dismissed for the day by my supervisor, I hobbled towards the time clock only to be stopped by a manager who told me there was much more to do and to get back on the floor. I told them my partner was in the hospital and they seemed even more mad for whatever reason. I stood for a minute with my shaking legs and arms bruised from being crushed by heavy boxes, near tears, and decided that this was a crock of crap. Just shrugged and told him I quit, walked out, and never came back. He couldn't have been too surprised. Of the group of about 15 I was hired with, I was the last one standing after a month. Screw you on track. Story 24. I had been at the boat factory for a couple of days. He asked how I like it, and I said it's great. He told me, I'll get you a raise after 1 month, and after 90 days, I'll get you another raise and you'll be a team leader. I was like, thanks, I appreciate it. But then he came out of the office and said, there's a guy on the phone who wants to talk to you. I walked upstairs, got on the phone, and received an offer to be a lead man on an extruder. I had been making plastic for a couple of years. The pay was about double what I was making at the factory. I walked downstairs and asked him, do you need 2 weeks' notice? He said, what do you mean? You told me you liked the job. I said, I just got offered a job making plastic, which doesn't require itchy fiberglass. The pay is double and I'm the lead operator. He said, can you at least work until the end of the day? So I think I quit on the third day. Story 25. Signed up for a temp agency. They placed me at a factory. I needed work and I'm not too good for manual labor, so I agreed, despite having no factory work history. Because I have no factory work experience, they stick me in the corner with the Easter Seals employees. If you don't know what that is, Easter Seals is an organization that places the disabled, both mentally and physically, into jobs. On day 2, I'm pulling stacks of calendars off a machine and stacking them in boxes. I go to grab a stack and suddenly my hand slips into the machine. It was a machine that straps those plastic ties around bundles of paper products. I'm not sure exactly what did it, but I knew it had something to cut the plastic ties. So I started to get freaked out. I'm a 20-ish-year-old woman. I can't lose my fingers in a factory accident. The Easter Seals person standing across from me sees this happen and literally tries to put the next bundle of calendars onto the machine that is holding my hand hostage. I have to tell her to stop and to go find some help because I'm stuck and I might lose my fingers. 10 freaking minutes later, someone comes by and hits the release on the machine. They check out my hand, ask if I'm okay, and tell me I can take a quick break to collect myself. I collected myself all right. I collected my crap out of the break room, walked out to my car, got in, drove to the nearest Dunkin' Donuts, and as I was getting a cup of coffee, grabbed a job application and asked to speak with a manager. Story 26. Hired as a dishwasher when I was 15. Showed up first day right after school, about 3 o'clock. Went to a basement-like area where bus trays of dishes, pots, and pans were stacked in racks, covering almost every square inch of the floor space. It was horrendous and very likely a health code violation. I don't think anyone had washed a single plate or fork in a week. They had about 6 sinks and unlimited hot water, so I got busy. Had 2 sinks of clean hot water, 2 sinks of soapy water, and 2 sinks of clean hot water to rinse. Processed those dishes, etc. like a beast. Cleaned them all by about midnight. Stopped by to talk to the owner on the way out. He was amazed and very appreciative. Told him I could continue to do that for him and stay on top of it at 3 to 4 days per week, 4 hours a day, and it would never get anywhere approaching that disgusting again. He just said, "No, I just want you to come in every week or so and knock it out like I just did." I told him no way in hell I'd do that. Only did it that one time to show him I was organized and a hard worker, and that I just assumed that it got that bad because their former dishwasher had left for some reason and it took a minute to get someone in. Not that that was normal for them. I had told him to pay me now and we'd part ways. Schmuck called me for 3 months asking me to come back. Nope, screw me once, shame on you. Screw me twice, shame on me. And for the record, my dad taught me to finish a job I start, never quit in the middle. That's the only reason I didn't walk out the minute I saw the room. He would have never understood how awful that room was and would have been disappointed if I didn't finish the job. Fast forward 9 years to when I was just starting my first real job after college. After 2 days, I was losing my mind sitting behind a desk reviewing financial data. But that lesson came back and I didn't quit. I stuck it out, got a series of promotions, and ultimately spent 40 years there. Hated 30 of those years, but today I've been retired for almost 20 months and my wife and I are living our best life, financially set. The juice is worth the squeeze, but damn, I hated washing those nasty, dirty, cigarette-caked on dishes. Story 27. It was a part-time job and I was in training. The kid, under 25, was telling us how to direct traffic. I'd been doing it for 18 plus years at this point as a part-time job with the local sports facility. The company had been bought out and we were picked up and trained by this new company. He was directing us in a way that made it very unsafe. That, coupled with the comments he made about some of the women in the session and how he conducts his evaluations, rubbed me the wrong way. When I got back home, I called and told them I wasn't interested in continuing training. They asked me to return some papers, so I did. When I was returning them, they asked why I didn't want to continue. I told them that they were going to get someone harmed or cause an accident. I also told them that their supervisor had made comments about women that were on the edge of being inappropriate. I told them that, in good conscience, I wouldn't work for him or them if they supported that. I was employed for less than 2 hours. I found something better. Story 28. I worked at a Verizon premium retailer right when smartphones started to come out. I worked there for 3 years and absolutely loved it. Since it was a family-owned business, they didn't have KPI and commission was flat rate per contract or feature. It allowed me not to feel like I had to push unneeded features like the internet on older people that didn't need it and could work with customers and find the most optimal solution for what they actually needed. And top it off, for a part-time college student, it paid really well, about $25 per hour average.
I quit in order to follow my new wife for her military training. A little over 2 years later, I was back in the same college town and finishing my degree, so I called my old manager up and he hired me back immediately over the phone. What I didn't realize is that at the time, the family-owned company was sold to a competitor. My first shift was more just to fill out paperwork and take some online training required by Verizon. I found out that commission now was a sliding scale based on KPI and what percentage of new contracts had data plans. This was at the time when only about 50% of phones being sold were smartphones, and internet packages were $30 on top of calls and text. I watched the employees upsell and send out older people who didn't even know how to use email with the new $300 with 2-year contract Galaxy Note 2. It felt gross. I finished my 4-hour shift, called up the manager the next day, and told him to not even file the employment paperwork and not to worry about paying me for those hours. I never liked sales, but I loved being helpful and was a techie that liked playing with the latest tech. I liked that job because it didn't feel like I was selling anything. People came in with a need and I felt zero pressure to do anything other than find a solution for that need. I have never and will never take another sales job. Story 29. 5 shifts. So about a week or two. I was 17 and working at McDonald's. The manager scheduled me during finals week, right in the middle of class. During the actual finals I needed to take and pass to graduate high school. He for real said my job was more important and that I needed to be there. Yeah, I left mid-shift, walked to my car, and just drove home. A few days later, they called me while I was 3 hours away on a family trip, trying to force me to come in right then and there because someone else had no-showed. We need you to come in. Someone no-showed. I'm about 3 hours away on a trip, and anyway, well, you need to come back and work. Nope, too bad. I don't work there anymore. Anyway, bye. And I hung up. That was the last time I ever heard from them. I found out later that the manager who tried to force me to work through my finals got canned not long after. Sucks to suck. What sort of logic is that anyway? Choosing between working a shift at McDonald's or graduating high school. Idiot. Story 30. I quit during my second shift at Blockbuster Video. I had previously worked managing bookstores and then moved up to auditing the stores in the chain. Safety, credit card security, break policies, etc. I was working as an accountant at the time and wanted 10 or more hours of extra work to get some extra cash for a few months. During my first shift, I asked about my break. The shift manager was completely wrong. The break room was 4 OSHA violations in one, and the signage explaining workers' rights was concealed. The next day at my real job, I went to the state attorney general's website. I printed out the rules that were being broken, instructions on how to contact the government, the potential penalties, and best of all, the part that said the manager who gave workers false information was personally responsible for paying thousands of dollars per worker in fines. I also printed the law stating it was illegal to prevent someone from making this data known. Then I went to Blockbuster and started handing them out. That same schmuck came to talk to me, and I handed him a 4-page stapled and highlighted handout. I explained that if he tried to stop me from handing out the packets, he would be fined $3,000 per person on that shift. He could not trespass me either, for one of the laws I had printed out. I made sure the 4 people on shift all got a package, and they took spares to pass around. I left a pile in the break room after making it clear that if they were tossed out, it was again a civil crime. Then I turned in my apron. Story 31. Not me, but my husband. Maybe 2 hours? It was supposed to be a project manager job in a city 12 hours away by car. They flew him there and got him set up in a hotel. When he showed up for work the first day, he was instructed to get in a van with a bunch of others and go pound the pavement, getting signatures or petitions. It was not remotely close to what the job was advertised as. He was told, yeah, once you show you can do this, you get your own team to lead. He noped out after an hour or two of actually trying to get signatures. In a big city, it was practically impossible to get anyone's attention. He told the boss, I'm out of here. Get me home now. I was impressed they actually got him on a plane within 24 hours. When he told me what happened, I had expected them to leave him high and dry. That 2-hour paycheck from out of state screwed up our taxes and his employment claims a few months later when COVID shutdown started and ruined his new job. Story 32. Friend worked at a pizza place that was the only restaurant that delivered in our entire small town. He was delivering something to my house and asked if I'd like to work part-time delivering, and only delivering, for a few hours after my main job, tax-free for like $3.50 an hour. Minimum wage was like $5.15 or something. Sounded easy enough, so I said all I need are Monday nights off. Got off from my full-time job and walked across the street to the restaurant. Like I said, small town, and set off on my first few deliveries. But when I got back and they started showing me how to wait and clean tables, cook stuff in the tiny 150-degree kitchen, and at closing time, all the cleaning, was already mad, then they said my next shift would be Monday night. Apparently, Monday nights were the main reason they needed help because my friend had band practice and the other guy had Lamaze classes. I told them I was out the next day and got a call from the owner telling me how disappointed he was. Told him he should talk to the guy I thought was a friend and the BS he fed me. Think I worked 3 to 4 hours. Story 33. 1 week. I got a job as a software engineer at a startup, though what I didn't know until the first day is that it was a lead engineer position, and I was supposed to lead a team of 4 other developers, when I only had around 1 year of web developer experience. For some reason, the CEO I had my hiring process with liked me and must have totally misunderstood what I said, as I was very clear that I was a junior, even though I got 3 times my previous salary, and the CEO and the team members I was supposed to lead said I was doing good. I didn't want to do it as I didn't feel comfortable, especially since I had no reason to be a lead as I didn't know the tech stack and had less experience than everyone on the team. Very weird set of circumstances. Story 34. I quit a job after 3 months. It was my first full-time job as a software developer with no degree, and in this field, no degree and no experience is very hard to get hired. I took whatever I could, and this company sucked. I had an office because we were only like 5 people working there in a big office space. My boss would come into my office sometimes and just watch me work, which was really uncomfortable. Then my other boss would criticize me every day, even though she didn't know what was being developed. She told me I was in La La Land when I asked her a question. Again, at this point, I'd been there less than 3 months. I was the only developer there. After 3 months, I had enough experience to actually get an interview and I found another position, but that was the quickest I've ever quit a job. Story 35. I think it was 3 days. I needed a summer job in college and had previous experience as a shift manager. The local college said they were hiring shift managers and I could basically get as many hours as I wanted. Shift managers basically meant me and the delivery driver who made 50 cents less than me but got tips. There were also more in-store people than could accommodate the hours they claimed. After 2 days, they wanted me to run everything and do closing procedures. I turned in my resignation on day 3. Well, if you like these stories, here's more. YouTube thinks you're going to love this. Catch you in that video.